Before we begin, thank you very much to Sean D for the contribution over on Ko-fi. Thank you very much for chipping in and helping the channel keep going and keep surviving. And I'm glad you appreciate the videos. Again, thank you very much for the kind words. I've decided not to read the messages because I don't know which ones are personal or which ones, whatever. I don't want to be weird about it. So, but thank you very much. I do appreciate it. I said it before. And I'll just point out, like, the Patreon is great. I really prefer the Patreon. But if you just want to leave a one-time tip, that's what the Ko-fi's for. And Ko-fi doesn't take anything out of it. That's the nice thing. Whatever you put into Ko-fi, I get 100% of, which is great for me. So it's there if you need it or want it. It's not necessary. Okay? I'm doing okay. We're doing fine over here. But I must now address something that keeps coming up in the Q&A videos, so I think it's high time we do a full video on this. If you are a viewer who goes to the Q&A videos every month, you'll know that I have a brand new rule because it got way, way out of hand. The rule now is I have no comment when it comes to Gun Megatron. You will not believe, like literally, like for over a year, I have been doing these monthly Q&As, and literally every time I would have more than one person in the comment section who thinks they've cracked the code. They think they have figured out the way of getting a Gun Megatron released in the US completely fine and legal. And I'm sorry, you are not the magic lawyer. You are not the copyright lawyer sitting at home that finally cracked something that Hasbro's own lawyers haven't been able to figure out for 4 decades. I promise you, if there was a way of doing it legally, Hasbro would have done it already because it would print money. They can't. Drop it. Let it go. Let's be honest. Let's upset a few G1ers here, shall we? As a G1er myself, I will just go out there and say it. Megatron's alt mode was always stupid. The fact that the leader of the villains had to transform into something one of his minions had to wield in order for it to be effective, and continuity-wise, in the original cartoon, there is no explanation for why he would do this, because there's nothing indicating. Later fictions did indicate he's more powerful in gun mode because all of his energy is going toward being a purely offensive weapon. But nothing in normal canon of Transformers at that time said there was any advantage to doing it. So it just felt super weird. So I'm just going to go out there and say it was a dumb alt mode to begin with. But the more and more I look at it, the more and more I realize I don't think they had a choice in the matter. A common question now is, well, if he can't be a gun, if there's no way for him to be a gun anymore, then what could they have done? What could Diacone have offered? Like, what other toy in Diaclone, Micro Change, Micro Man, whatever, could Megatron have been to avoid this entire scenario from happening? So that's what we're doing today. Let's take a look at some of the other options they had across all of these different toy lines. And the first place you go is to Micro Change, the original toy line that Megatron came from. And frankly, so much of those toys were devoted to just being normal, everyday household objects that weren't generally, things that you turn into a bad guy. There were other guns. One of them eventually became G1 Browning, and then this one got left in the dust. So, yeah, this is, I can't remember the actual name of the robot, but obviously he is based on a revolver. And he has a very similar transformation scheme to Megatron, though I think he looks a lot more jank than Megatron does. Megs definitely came across a lot better than this one. This is also one of the ones with firing fists, and Hasbro seemed to avoid firing fists, except for, like, all but the largest toys. Actually, I take that back, because the normal, okay, I take that back. I'm forgetting about things like Trailbreaker and Inferno. Never mind, scratch that. My point is, You had a bunch of guns, and then that's it. Everything else in Microchange was something a little bit more everyday. You had your tape recorder for Soundwave. You had your camera for Reflector. You had this guy. You just a transforming pair of binoculars. You know, once upon a time, maybe in a different universe, this could have been Perceptor. But no, Scopeman here, I don't think would have set the world on fire as the leader of the Decepticons. What with his useless alt mode and bell-bottom jeans and robot mode. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of options in Microchange. There really isn't. Then you get to things that are also unreleased, like the working flashlight, which I will admit, the robot mode is actually really cool. I actually really like the robot mode. This, like, you could maybe get away with, like, figuring out how to make this look like some kind of big weapon toy. Potentially, like, if you retool the handle into something, you add some, like, treads to make it look like a big, you know, like, energy tank or something, but no, that's a stretch. That's a stretch. I don't think the flashlight's going to work either, despite the robot looking cool. No. See, there's one barrier that I think a lot of people forget. When they think of Diaclone, you think of things like, let's go to Diaclone now, okay? Let's explain away Diaclone. So when you think of like Diaclone, that's what you think of when you think of original Transformers. So you go, well, what other Diaclone toys are there that could have been G1 Megatron? And the truth is not a lot. So the first barrier you have to remember is this had to be ready to go at launch in 1984. So anything that was released in 1984 or later for Diaclone, and there were, the Diaclone line went on until 1985. At least this brand of it did, let's say that. No, like, all of those would have had to have been available in 1983 to be available in 1984 for the launch of Transformers. So a lot of those molds, those last 2 years of molds, are completely off limits, as is anything that was conceptual at the time. And then most every mold from this line became a Transformer. Okay, so you have, like, I think the most common ones that people go to is like, well, Blitzwing could have been Megatron, because that's cool, like a tank and a jet at the same time. That would have been cool. 1984 release. See, there's a few characters that were in the first season of G1, but they were 1984 releases for Diaclone, which meant they didn't come out until 1985 in the US. That would be your Dinobots and your Constructicons. Meaning, 84 releases off the table. Has to be something that was ready to go for 1984's launch. So it had to come from 1983. So Blitzwing came too late. And that also means that the completely unused helicopter jet robo here on the side, like that one, that's a super cool figure, and I don't know why Hasbro never used it. It's something of a holy grail of mine. I have no idea why Hasbro never used it in any way, shape, or form, even when they were kind of struggling to get new toys and molds out there for G1. I don't know why this one went by the wayside. It's a super neat design. I like it. I like it a lot. But again, 84, not available. In fact, from what I could tell, the only 83 Diaclone car robots line from either 82 or 83 that actually waited until 85, that was currently available, that they could have used, was Inferno. And you're not going to turn the fire truck, possibly the most heroic of all vehicles, into a bad guy. You're just not going to do it. So basically, Diaclone was tapped. Whatever could have been used was used. And probably used to the best effect they probably could have had available to them. So that brings about, well, if car robots was not viable, as far as like an alternate Megatron, if there's no other option there, what about the rest of Diaclone? Because they technically could have used some other Diaclone toy in order to make a Megatron. Okay, so let's take a look real quick, because Diaclone's a super obscure line. First off, let's take a look at one of the odder entries, because a lot of Diaclone is odd. But here's Double Soldier. And hang on. Someone's screwing. Hang on. Windows are screwing up. I apologize. So, before we continue, let me. Where's the? Hang on. I need to actually properly look at this. So we are going. See, we are going to look at. We're going to thank robottoydays.com for all of these images because vintage Diaclone is super hard to actually find proper images for. So there's really only so many places to go. So yeah, shout out to them for a lot of really good coverage. But Double Soldier here actually has an interesting look to him. The wide body thing would have made him look pretty menacing as a Transformer. The head sculpt and head design, the helmet there, I could actually see as a villain. A bunch of rockets and weapons would definitely make him look a lot more evil. His gimmick was that he had a second robot mode, which is actually super rare in Transformers. You could have played with that a little bit. He could have had like a standard command mode and then a combat mode. That would have been neat. Okay, so that almost works. Like, I could actually imagine that. So what was his vehicle mode in all of it? Oh, I don't think we can work with this one, which is a shame because a lot of the problem with Diaclone releases is they weren't turning into one individual vehicle. They were more Power Ranger Super Sentai based, where they would break apart into multiple vehicles. This is big powered. Yes, doesn't that name sound familiar? Diaclone used it first. Now, I'm not totally against the idea of using a multi-vehicle Diaclone toy because I think the possibility of them still being like worthwhile toys, and especially because it's the villain leader, it should stand out a little bit. I think this is still viable technically. We'll explain later. But no, this kind of would have been cool. You would have had to explain away the cockpits or like put new parts over them to cover them as canopies, but you know, this might have been workable. The robot mode looks like it could have been a villain. He's big and beefy. He's got these huge horns and masked face. Like, this could potentially work. There's a reason it doesn't work. We'll get to that soon. But the weird part here is he has this gimmick, which looks very Brain Master. It's pre-Brain Master, obviously. It doesn't work quite the same, but that's a weird thing to explain away. I can accept a Megatron toy that had two robot modes based on command and combat modes, but this, like, our leader of the Decepticons being this little guy who then had to get into the big body for combat, that's a little far. See, the only one I could find that split the difference between everything was Dia Attacker, who is a super cool looking toy. Okay, it does have a more villainous vibe to it. I like the big spiked chest and horns. That would definitely work for a villainous character. Oh, and hey, he doesn't break apart. He just transforms into one solid vehicle, and it's kind of a cool looking vehicle. I'm actually kind of into this one. Not that I would ever go after like vintage Diaclone because it's crazy expensive. But you know what? If I were to ever win the lottery, this might be the one I would go after because I do think it looks really, really cool. Also, it has an alternate vehicle mode where everything gets super long. So you have this like big fighter, like big like attack platform, or you have this long space cruiser going on. I think both of those are pretty cool. Again, you'd have to explain away cockpits or cover them up. But still, this is a step in the right direction. This is about as close as I found to a Diaclone toy that made a satisfying Megatron that covered all the bases. However, the problem with a lot of these Diaclone toys, and I wish I could find example images of this, like I said, these toys are stupid rare, so getting good comparison shots is nigh impossible. Diaclone toys were big. Diaclone toys were very big, like Metroplex size toy. So Dia Attacker here is like Jetfire height. And you were not going to have Optimus Prime being about that tall and then have Dia Attacker who's about that tall. That's not gonna work. No one's like, no, you're not gonna have the villain be that much bigger than the rest. I know that became a trope later on, but that's when Optimus had super modes to counter it, so I don't think that counts as well. So yeah, a lot of these wouldn't work basically because they're just too freaking big. They're just too big. The closest I came to like size-wise was Dia Battles, who again, 3 different vehicles splitting apart into individual vehicles and then combining into the robot. And the robot itself does look nice. Maybe a little too nice. I actually think this one looks a little bit too friendly. I can't imagine it being Megatron, right? Like I can't imagine it being a villain. Like, I know he's got a little bit of the silhouette of Seeker, but it's just like the face is too nice. Like I wouldn't be able to go with this one. So for those who don't know Diaclone, you go like, well, what about the villain side of it? Well, Diaclone for a long time didn't really have villains. In fact, during Car Robots, there were no villains. You know, like what became Starscream and Thundercracker were on the same side as everybody else. They were perfectly fine. It was a while before Diaclone had its villains, which was the Warooters. So if we take a look at one of those, yeah, no. If I thought Dia Battles looked too nice to be a villain, this guy looks goofy. The big round eyes, they look like puppy dog eyes from a cartoon. No, this is not going to work. And they also split into multiple vehicles who are vaguely bug-based, and I don't think that would have worked either. So Diaclone came up completely dry. Nothing in Diaclone really set well with me. So in desperation, I went to Microman, which did provide a few Transformer things. You know, Micro Change is a spin-off of Microman, etc., etc. The only thing I came close to finding something that looked villainous was Death King. Okay, with a name like Death King, you better be a villain. Now, color-wise, you definitely need a new color scheme. That wasn't anything unfamiliar. You know, Transformers borrowed a lot of the Diaclone color schemes for simplicity, but came up with their own as well. Skywarp, I think, is the best example of that. So, color-wise, yeah, you could have done up something different for him. But again, that vehicle. And the fact that he is, too, a gigantic figure. So again, that really would not have worked. The something to remind everyone is that Car Robots was designed to try and create like sensible-sized toy cars and jets, rather than like these jumbo toys that these were. So it's more like an effort to downsize the line to produce like cheaper, more approachable toys, as well as just more contemporary designs. So yeah, not a whole lot of room to go for on that one. Nothing in Diaclone matches that. Nothing in Diaclone, proper original Diaclone, Microman, or anything works for that. That's actually an important thing to remember, is that the 84 line was robots in disguise. Everything in the original 84 lineup was designed to disguise itself as a real-world item or vehicle. There was no Omega Supreme yet. There was no Cybertronian vehicles yet. You know, everything had to look like a standard car, truck, van, whatever. The only exceptions to that were the mail-away Power Dashers, you know, and as little bonus items that were never in any of the fictions in the US. Whatever. Like, that was fine. You can get away with that. So, yeah, you kind of had to stick with that theme because that was the whole theme of the original G1 series. Now, obviously, they expanded afterwards, partially for variety, but also partially because of desperation. You know, they didn't have a whole lot of toys to pick from when it came to filling out this line that suddenly became a hit, and now we have to start thinking of, like, how to continue this line. It'd be about a year before they developed the 85 was when they developed all their upcoming new toys, and then had to fill out the ranks with whatever was left in Japan that they could scrape up, which is how we got things like Omega Supreme, Jetfire, Whirl, Roadbuster, Odd Stuff. It's how Insecticons came about, you know, all of that. So you really didn't have much left. And honestly, out of the Diaclone and Microchange toys that they could pick from in for the 84 lineup, Megatron does look villainous, like more so than the other guns. Like he does have this really vicious look to his head sculpt that works. And I think another part of it is the fact that it just had a lot more play value. So the gun that we have for Megatron, the Walther P38. So all those attachments that make that toy so fun and make it such a complete package of an action figure, that is because it is based on a famous version of the gun from a show called A Man from U.N.C.L.E. And that show featured the main character using his heavily customized Walther P38. And for some really random fluke, we got to actually have that version in the US, which is basically their way of comparing Optimus, who comes with a full trailer and battle station, to Megatron, who has all these additional parts for the gun mode that turn into a cannon. All of that is just Hasbro's way of kind of balancing it out. The bad guy's leader comparable to the good guy leader, not only in how much stuff the toys do, but also in size. Also, they both disguise themselves as something real world, so it balances out pretty well. So the long and short of it is, no, I don't think there was any other toy that could have been G1 Megatron. They were either in better use as Autobots or completely unsuitable to be a villain in the franchise. They were too big. The designs were too weird. That's another thing I didn't even touch on. A lot of this stuff, especially in Microman, got cut from this list because they're just too goofy looking. They just would not have worked in the Transformer aesthetic at all. So, in a toy line where, yeah, they had options, really they didn't. Really, I think this is the best thing they could have gone with. And let's be honest here. If you're gonna decide out of a pile of toys what's a good thing, what's a bad thing, a gun's gonna be seen as a bad thing. A gun is gonna be seen as something for a villain. Because it's gonna upset a group of people out there, but let's recall. Yeah, it is a tool designed to kill. Period. Like no matter what spin you put on it, that's the purpose of it. So it makes sense for the villain of a transforming robot toy line. It just does. And even though it's super goofy, especially in fiction, how this ends up working, honestly, I think with the limitations that they were working with, I think it's the best call they could have made. All around, I think it's the best choice they could have made. I don't think there's another option. And this is a very long way of finally just laying it out there. For anyone who asked me, I've done the research. No. There is no other toy that really would have worked for Megatron. But maybe I missed something. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something else that you have in mind. So, by all means, feel free to leave it in the comments below. More than open to any other idea I have not considered. But thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.